Angela, you recently did some research on the effect of Superstorm Sandy on the U.S. economy and businesses' supply chains. What did economists say was the overall impact on the U.S. economy from the storm?
Well, economists at a recent panel by the National Association of Business Economics predicted that the negative impact from Sandy to GDP could be as much as 0.6 percentage points. Economist Greg Dako estimated total economic losses of 30 to 50 billion in the area from total infrastructure losses and disruptions to business activity. Despite increased construction spending we're expecting to see post-Sandy, one economist said that increases following the storm may not fully offset industry slowdowns and canceled building plans.
At least according to one survey from the Institute for Supply Management, very few businesses saw long-lasting disruptions just to their supply chains. Is that right?
That's right. Around 2/3 of businesses were affected to some extent, but only 3% of supply chains were affected to a larger extent. Of those that experienced disruption, 89% indicated they would be disrupted for 3 weeks or less, and none of them expected to be disrupted for more than 6 weeks.
Sandy certainly highlighted the importance of having a contingency plan, but when we're talking about business continuity and disaster planning, it goes beyond just big disasters. Other disruptions could be caused by a labor dispute at a port, a fire in a distribution center, or it could just be losing electricity for a couple of days. One of the most important pieces of any business continuity plan, and it's the one that most companies think of first, is technology and protecting your systems and data. I spoke to Steve Epner of BSW Consulting Group about what distributors need to keep in mind when they're building out their plans as it pertains to their systems and data. Here's what he had to say.
What can you tell me about the technology piece, about the data piece? What are the important pieces that people need to think about when it comes to their systems and making sure, whether it's a data backup or whatever? I mean, where do you start with them on that front?
Well, most of them have good backup, but most of them do backup. They don't necessarily have backup. And so the first thing that I tell people that they should do is using a test system. Don't do this on your live system. But using a test system, attempt to reload your backup files. Because sometimes we have found in a disaster is the first time they've ever tried to reload anything, and then they find for 8 years they've been running this process, but it's never completed successfully and they don't have any backup. Make sure that you can recover everything that you would need. Go borrow another system that looks just like yours, take your backup tapes, whatever it is, and go over there and make sure on a weekend that you can reestablish your operation.
Do you find people are surprised by what they find when they try to do that?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Now, the more sophisticated companies aren't because they've done it. They've had to recover files along the way, so they already learned early on where they were making a mistake because they tried to recover something that wasn't there. So they panicked and they figured out how to test it, and then they started testing it on a regular basis. However, there are many people out there, especially your smaller companies, and that would be a lot of your readership, who have probably never tested the backup. So my first thing to them would be test the backup, and if you can't recover from what you've got, fix it. Then the second thing you need to do, or at least I think you need to do, especially if you rely on a single person to manage the operation of the system, or if the only person that manages the operation is somebody outside, I would establish a backup for that person or that company. You don't want to be reliant, because especially if you're relying on somebody, you're in St. Louis, and you got one guy who takes care of 4 or 5 or 10 different companies, and we have a tornado come through like we did a couple years ago that blew out the airport. It blew out homes and hurt people, and if this one person that you're relying on is hurt, or his 23 clients all need him at the same day, and he's had to prioritize people, do you have a backup plan? Do you have somebody else that can come in and help you if you need it? In fact, I'll summarize into one simple piece of advice. Have no single point of failure. Now, it's not always possible, but for the most part, you can have backup for everything.